What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Cinema Trip Retro Reviews. I am Wyatt, and today on the show, I'm going to be talking about It's a Wonderful Life from 1946. Haven't already, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Cinema Trip Reviews. Also, drop in, leave us a good review wherever you get your podcasts. Really helps the show out a lot, and I really appreciate it. So, to kick off our holiday reviews for the month, I decided to go back to an all-time Christmas classic with It's a Wonderful Life from 1946. It's been a long time this movie's been out here for, and it's highly regarded as not only one of the best Christmas movies of all time, but one of the greatest movies of all time in general. And I mean, I hate to say it, and I'm sorry. I know it maybe make a lot of people mad. I've never seen this movie. This is the first time watch for me. I have never seen It's a Wonderful Life. It's a movie that everybody talks about every single year. I know the basic premise of the movie. I know, the quote from the movie, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. I know a lot about the movie. I just haven't actually got a chance to actually watch it. Growing up as a kid, black and white movies aren't for everybody, especially kids. A lot of these older movies, especially like 30s and 40s, they're very slow. I mean, even getting into like 60s and 70s, a lot of those movies are kind of slow pace, takes a while to get going. They're not for everybody. It's old school filmmaking. It's all about the story and the dialogue. There's not a ton of, action stuff or a lot of stuff that keeps people in the seats, especially nowadays. A lot of people don't have the attention spans to go back and watch a lot of these old classic movies and everything. That's why it's really hard to introduce like kids and the younger generation to like the old school Universal monster movies and everything, because that's really what I know, going like as far as going back and watching like really old movies from like the 30s or 40s and stuff. A lot of the movies I watch are like classic horror movies, like the Universal monsters and everything. So to be honest, I haven't seen a ton of movies from the 30s and 40s and everything. I have seen like Nosferatu. That might be the 20s or 30s. It's been a long time since I've seen Nosferatu. Speaking of that, that movie comes out here in a couple weeks. I will be reviewing that. This movie is directed by Frank Capra and also stars James Stewart, who I am familiar with mainly from his Hitchcock movies, Vertigo and Rear Window. I haven't seen a ton of his movies, but I do know about him and his body of work and everything. I do know that he is one of the old time greats. It also stars Donna Reed as his love interest within the movie. So, like I mentioned, even though I haven't seen the movie, I am familiar with this plot just because it has been done a ton of different times throughout media, whether it's TV or movies. It's been parodied. The story itself has been, copied, or, they've paid homage to it in some capacity. Just the basic story of, what somebody wishes they were never born, and then like an angel or somebody kind of takes them through the world and kind of shows them what life would be like without them in it. And the people that, they're directly interacting with, whether it's their parents or their friends or the people that are in their life, what their lives are like without that person in the world. I am familiar with just that basic story, and I knew about that going into this movie and everything, but boy, I didn't realize the depth that this movie has and the lengths that it goes to show you this guy's story and everything. And just to be completely upfront and honest, I saw, the movies from 1946, movies about 2 hours and 10 minutes. I was like, oh boy, 2 hour long movie from the 1940s. This could be bad. This could be boring. This could be long and drawn out. And especially with a lot of, people's opinions and the hype around it as one of the greatest Christmas movies and as one of the greatest movies of all time, it has a lot to live up to, especially if you haven't seen a movie like this or this movie in general. And I gotta say, it lives up to the hype. It really does. I mean, even from like the first 20 minutes to a half hour, it had me in. It had me locked in just because it feels like, even though you're dealing with like angels and stuff here and there throughout the movie, overall, I feel like it feels like real characters. It feels like a real down to earth, grounded movie, and it feels like a real town that exists somewhere and that you can go to. It just feels so real and grounded, and it's just what the movie set in it's just a town. It just feels like everybody knows each other. Everybody knows their names, and everybody knows where each other lives, or so and so's wife, or their kids. Everybody knows each other in this small town. And as stories go with these types of towns and everything, there's usually people that are just trying to get out. They feel like they're stuck, and that is the case with the main character of George Bailey here, played by James Stewart. And this movie, with the runtime of about 2 hours and 10 minutes, you really go throughout his whole life from childhood all the way to being an adult, and then you actually reach that point where you have him where he actually contemplates suicide. He's really down on his luck. Everything throughout his life has been building up to this moment, and he just reached a peak where he's just like, I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like the world would just be better off if I was never born. And then you have Clarence, the angel that's assigned to him, who hadn't had his wings yet. He's still trying to earn them. He was assigned to George to kind of push him in the right direction and show him that life is worth living, and that this life is worth having him in it, especially for the people around him and how much he means to everybody around him and the people in his life. And I really thought the whole movie was going to be, this angel kind of walking him through and showing everything. And that's really not the case, because that doesn't happen until really like the last half hour of the movie. The whole movie leading up to that point is showing you George's life and everything that he's had to go through growing up. Whether I believe it starts out with him being like a young kid, like maybe like 8, 9, 10 years old, and then it cuts to him out of high school. He's about to go on this road trip and go into college, and then it cuts to him being like a young adult a couple years later, 4 years, 6 years later, running the family business and everything. And then it cuts to him like as an adult. Even though this movie was made in the 40s and with the runtime it is, the writing is so good, and the filmmaking about it is so damn good, because it doesn't feel like that runtime at all. You expect it to kind of be drawn out or a little boring or something like that, but no, I mean, it really keeps you locked in. It shows you all the main things you need to know about George leading up towards the end and everything, without it feeling rushed and without it feeling kind of over bloated and kind of too long in a way. I feel like it's the perfect length. I feel like the dialogue is perfect, and it's perfectly paced for what it is and what it's trying to do, because it gives you everything you need leading up to the angel coming down and talking with him and walking him through and showing him what life would be like without him. That way it really kind of takes effect within you, because all these characters he's been interacting with throughout the whole movie and throughout his whole life and everything. So you really feel that impact of him not being there has on everything within the town and the town itself and with the people within the town. And I mean, it's really fascinating. It's fascinating because it's a movie from the 40s and it's so well put together on just a filmmaking front, and just like on a technical level of filmmaking, and also within the writing and everything and the acting itself. James Stewart, he's terrific. I mean, he has his own quirks and the way he talks, but that's just him as an actor and everything. But I think he plays a lovable guy that you want to see succeed. And this movie does a great job of making you feel compassion for the main character of George, just because, I mean, a lot of people I'm sure can relate to him. I mean, this movie is mainly about like, don't take anything for granted within life. Like, you have an effect on everybody around you, whether you know it or not. But there's also another kind of side of the movie where it's kind of telling you like, you need to go out and chase your dreams. You can't just kind of sit back and let people kind of dictate what you're going to do. You have to make your own path. You have to do what you want to do and what makes you happy. Because the whole movie, I mean, George just wants to go out and travel. He wants to see the world. He wants to go to college. He wants to get a good job, like building things and building planes and buildings and stuff. He has dreams and aspirations, but he ends up putting them all aside because it's not convenient for other people around him. He's so focused on kind of pleasing the people around him instead of kind of focusing on his own goals and aspirations. Like whenever he's out of high school, he wants to go and travel the world. He wants to travel abroad for a while before he goes to college. And his dad ends up having a stroke. So he ends up having to kind of take over and run the family business, like this home and loan office that is his dad runs and everything. And he ends up running that. He says, okay, I'll run this for a while until my brother goes to college. Once he gets out of college, he'll come back, watch the plays. I'll end up going to college and do what I want to do. And he ends up kind of putting that on hold. His brother ends up going to college, ends up becoming like this, a great football player. And then he ends up coming back with a wife who her family wants to get him a job in another city and everything. So it's looking like George may have to hold on a little bit longer with this job and everything. There's a point where the war happens and he's not even able to serve because doesn't have hearing in one ear. But his brother ends up going on to be like, he wins, gets a Medal of Honor, ends up saving a ton of people. And it seems, and he has a one of these buddies that tries to get him in on a business of like making stuff out of plastic or whatever, like a plastic business. And George turns him down for that because he wants to do his own thing. And that guy ends up going on to like design things for the army and the military, and he ends up making a ton of money and becoming rich. And it just seems like every which way George is just kind of getting the short end of the stick of it. I mean, whether it's he just kind of stick around to, take over the family business because he feels like he has to, he feels like it's his obligation because, he wants to take over for his dad and make his dad proud. But he's also putting everything on the back burner. Everything that he wants to do ends up getting pushed to the side for one reason or another. And then he ends up seeing everybody kind of around him start to succeed more and more. And then he just feels a certain way about it. And I mean, it does a great job of portraying these things. It doesn't feel very rushed. It doesn't feel bloated by any means. I feel like it's the perfect pace for this type of movie. And it gives you everything that you need to make everything towards the end way more impactful whenever he ends up seeing the life that all these people are living without him in it and everything. It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating from a filmmaking level and from like a script writing level. Because I mean, like I mentioned, I don't have a lot of familiarity with movies from like the 40s and such. So I mean, just to see this type of quality movie that still stands the test of time, and even in 2024, it's amazing to see how well this holds up all these years later. And there's some heavy stuff in here. I'm not going to say like it's too heavy because I mean it is the 40s and everything. They're not out here swearing. There's not a ton of heavy subject matter, but I mean his father ends up dying. There's just some like stuff, normal life happenings that happen, and you're like, man, that sucks, that this is the worst possible time for George. And but there's also some comedy in here, and I feel like that's what helps the movie out the most, is because within some of these parts of the movie where life is getting real for George, you have comedy spliced throughout the whole movie, really, with these minor characters that he's interacting with, or even with George himself. And I think that works tremendously well. It works just as well today as it did, I'm sure, back in the 40s. I mean, this movie is a genuinely funny movie at certain points. And I think that's what helps it a lot too. Instead of it just being like a straight drama or, something like that, or just like, I think you definitely needed to have that comedy and lightheartedness throughout. And I think another thing that worked in the movie was just like his kind of relationship with Mary, played by Donna Reed in the movie. You see the early blossomings of like whenever they were kids, she was younger than him, but she had a huge crush on him. And like by the time they're out of high school and everything, she still has a crush on him. And they end up kind of, bonding. And just that scene where he's like walking her home and everything, it's such a tremendous scene. And I remember seeing it somewhere. I remember seeing it parodied before where he's like,
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down. I'll give you the moon, Mary.
It's just a tremendous scene. And James Stewart and Donna Reed are tremendous in this, because I mean they really feel like a real couple. They are just real people in general. And Mary, she's just straight up like a real ride or die wife. She's there for George at every turn. She supports him through thick and thin, through everything. Because not only does he have to deal with the death of his father and taking over the business, but he also has to deal with possibly losing the business at certain points, and he has to deal with this absolute huge jerk that kind of runs the town in a way, Henry Potter, this old curmudgeon that is just trying to take over anything and everything. And the one thing that he really doesn't have that's kind of keeping him from running everything is the business that George and his family have been running for like 20 years, I believe, at that point. And this dude is just trying every which way to scheme his way to take over that business or take over the town, or try to convince George to sell to him, or try to convince George to come work for him and everything. He's just a grade A antagonist for this type of movie. And I think it works. I think that guy does a great job as far as acting, and he's a great villain in the movie. I just feel like it doesn't, my only issue with him is it doesn't really go anywhere at the end of the movie. He just kind of fades out. You don't really see him again. And that issue is kind of resolved for the time being, which I'm sure after the movie takes place, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of issues with that guy going forward until he dies or whatever. But I mean, that's besides the point. But I think he was a great villain to kind of have in the background, kind of pulling strings, and someone like a little antagonist to have, for George to bounce off of amongst all these other problems that he has to deal with. And like I mentioned, I mean, just to have a movie from the 40s be this well crafted to show a character's pretty much whole life leading up to the last half hour, it's quite the accomplishment for the director and for all the filmmakers involved within it, and especially with the actors too, because the acting was pretty great all around in the movie. There really wasn't really any bad acting in it. But leading up to the last half hour, where you have the main plot point of the movie, where they're actually having a lot of issues going on with the business, they end up having to take an $8,000 deposit to the bank. They end up losing the $8,000 deposit. Ends up in the hand of the bad guy, the antagonist of the movie, Potter, and then nobody knows about it. It never really comes to light that he has it either way. They never mention that. Nobody ever really finds out that he's the one that has it. But because of that, George is at the point where he's most likely going to lose the business. He most likely may be going to jail because a lot of people are losing their money because of this. And he's kind of at the end of his rope. It's Christmas time, and he's at the point where he's just going to go and he's going to jump off the bridge to kill himself. And it's the perfect time for Clarence to come down, this guardian angel who's still looking to get his wings. He comes down to help him out, and what better way to help him out is to just jump in the river himself so George can dive in and save him, because he knows that he would save him if he hopped in. And it takes a little while, and it's such a funny scene because the guy that rescues both of them and pulls them out, he's sitting there witnessing Clarence telling George everything about him being this guardian angel and how he's been watching over his life and he's there to help him. And it's just, this guy is just blowing this dude's mind. He doesn't even say anything, but his face says it all before he ends up leaving. It's a great scene. And it takes a while for George to really believe him. And then he says, okay, you really want to wish to see what life is like without, being around or being born? Okay, I'll show you. And it takes him a little while to see exactly the happening of him being gone, but it really affects everything, the people around him and also the town himself. Without him being there, his brother sliding into the ice, nobody was there to save him, so his brother ended up dying. His parents didn't have any more kids. His mom is like running like a boarding house, like a bed and breakfast type thing. And it's such a sad scene because his mom doesn't know who he is and everything when he goes to see her. He goes to visit his wife, and his wife doesn't recognize who he is. And that's really kind of the final straw that breaks the back, is him trying to go to Mary, and she just doesn't recognize him. She runs away from him because he just seems like a creepy guy trying to grab at her and everything, and says he knows her and married to her. And even the town's changed because without George there to kind of hold Potter off, Potter has free reign to do whatever he wants. He's running the town at that point. And you really see the difference in the town. I mean, there's clubs everywhere, there's restaurants everywhere, there's big like burlesque places. The town looks completely different than it did previously. It's all lit up with lights and everything. Potter's definitely capitalizing and trying to make money any which way that he can. And that's driving a lot of people out of there. Even the park that George used to go to was turned into a cemetery. And a lot of the people that he really helped out that were in desperate need, he helped them get money to help build like houses or help them just get money in general when they needed it. There was no houses to be built. They were all left to the street. A lot of people were left to fend for themselves because Potter doesn't care. He's just out for the money. And for George to really see what life is like for the people around him without him in it, it makes him realize that life is worth living. And everything. So of course you have that happy ending where he realizes this and he runs home and he's able to get back, and he sees his kids. And even though the cops are there to arrest him and everything, he's so happy just to see his family and his wife and his kids and all that. And meanwhile, while all this is happening, his wife was out there gathering the troops, talking to everybody that George has helped out through his life. And they end up coming back and paying it back to him and helping him out, because even though he was short the $8,000, everybody comes up in groups, pulls all their money together to help him out of this jam the way that he helped them out. And it's such a great ending to the story and everything. And it's just like it's just such a nice little bow to wrap up the movie with. And of course, Clarence ends up getting his wings. You have the famous quote,
"Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings."
It's such a nice send off for a movie, and especially it's such a nice happy ending for George, because even though George is such a great character, you want this guy to succeed the whole movie, you've been just seeing him kind of kicked around at every turn, just something going wrong for him at every point. So it's great to see, everybody step up to help him in the end, and to see him finally happy with his life and his family, and to see the support of the people around him. But man, I can't believe I've been sleeping on this movie for so damn long. But I don't know if I would have appreciated this movie as much if I would have seen it when I was younger. I think this may have been the perfect time for me to watch it, because I mean, as I've gotten older, I've come to really love just these old school cinema, whether it's 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I've grown to love that type of filmmaking and those types of movies. I don't mind the slow pace. I don't mind a story to be built up and everything. I don't know. I just love the old school style of filmmaking. That's what I love about 70s movies. And that's why I love doing like retro reviews on here. Just because it really gives me a chance to go back and watch movies maybe I'm not familiar with, or just classic movies that aren't talked about enough, really. But I mean, what I liked about the movie, I really mentioned, is just the story itself put together, how well it was written, how well it was crafted and put together and shot. I mean, there's some instances in the movie where there's some hard cuts, and I'm not just talking about cutting to another scene. I'm talking about you're on a couple characters and it just hard cuts to another shot, either closer or farther away, and it's very jarring. And I mean, that's just, I'm sure, just being 1940s filmmaking and everything, there's some weird cuts and editing in there, which I mean, I'm sure it's just attributed to how they were editing at that time. But I mean, I don't think it takes you out of the movie or anything anyway. But I think what holds the movie together above everything else is James Stewart and his character of George Bailey, and also his wife, and just that relationship between them and everything. And it really makes you feel for him whenever he's kind of going through these hard times throughout his whole life, and especially when he kind of reaches this end of the rope, whenever that $8,000 goes in missing and he ends up coming home and he's just not himself. He's not happy. He's easily frustrated. He's taking it out on his kids. He's taking it out on his wife, when you're just not used to seeing this dude. You're not used to seeing this character like this. So you're kind of know exactly what his wife is feeling. You're kind of in her shoes in a way, because she's not used to seeing him like that. So it's very out of character to see George as angry and depressed and at the end of his rope towards the end of the movie. And it hurts to see him standing at the edge of that bridge, just, contemplating suicide and everything. So, I mean, that it just makes the happy ending in the movie that much sweeter whenever you get there. But I mean, I think the storytelling aspect and getting to see his life, it's great movie making, and it stands the test of time. And there's a reason this movie goes down as not only one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time, but one of the greatest movies of all time. Because I mean, to me personally, I mean, this movie does take place during Christmas towards the end of the movie. The whole movie is not a Christmas movie, I would say. The main last 30, 40 minutes of the movie is like a Christmas movie. So, I mean, it is a Christmas movie, but to me, I think it's just one of the greatest movies of all time, whether you count as a Christmas movie or not. I think this is easily one of the greatest movies of all time, especially it's just so it's crazy to see, to go back to the 40s and see a movie made like this that's better than a lot of movies that are put out right now, and in 2024. It's just crazy to see like a movie from the 1940s that is so well put together, you know, just story wise, or just being, script wise, just the drama in it and the comedy in it, and just how well it's paced and exactly where these jokes and these punchlines are. It works perfectly, mixed in with the drama aspect of the movie. But this is easily a movie that I'm going to go back to eventually. I don't know if I'm going to be watching it every year. I know a lot of people do, but with it being a little over 2 hours long and everything, I don't know if I'm going to be watching it every year. But this is definitely going to be a movie I may add to the collection, or watch definitely again in the future, because this is, like I mentioned, one of the greatest movies of all time for a reason. And yeah, I know that's a lot of hype to, build up for a movie, but I mean, if you're like me and you've waited this long and you haven't seen it, you need to fix that. Definitely go check out It's a Wonderful Life. I highly recommend it. Out of a buy it, rent it, or miss it, buy this movie. Add it to your collection if you can. I might go out and check it out, see if there's a Blu-ray of it or something, try to add it to my collection, because this movie has a lot of heart. This movie's just about, being an adult and just life in general. And I mean, and it's a lot of it is relatable as an adult now, especially, and like that goes back to what I mentioned. Like, I don't know if I would have appreciated it as much as a kid as I do now, because I feel like I relate to a lot of the stuff that was happening in the movie. And I mean, it's also just crazy to see how relatable this movie is, even though it was made in the 40s, because it was a vastly different time. You know, the shops they have, the way they talk, and you know, the way they interact with each other, you know, the cars and everything. It's such a different time period, but at the same time, it's so relatable in a way. It's so relatable. The characters, the relationships within it. There's a reason it's going down as one of the greatest movies of all time, and I highly, highly, highly agree with that. With that verdict of it. But that is my review of It's a Wonderful Life. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope if you haven't seen the movie, I hope you watch and enjoy it as much as I did. I love going back and watching these movies, but I also hate it in a way because I realized what I've been missing all these years. This is a movie I could have been watching for years and years now and really have grown to appreciate it even more. But I mean, even though I feel like I've been missing out on something, it's great to see, you know, a movie that really kind of pulls at the heartstrings and hits home and and you kind of relate to it in a way, especially a movie that old. You know, you don't really get that very often. But yeah, if you haven't seen the movie and you end up going out and watching it, let me know in the comments what you thought about the movie. If you have seen it and you've been watching it for years and years and years now, let me know what you like about the movie in the comments. Maybe what you don't like about the movie in the comments as well. I would love to know everybody's opinions on the movie because I know a majority of people love it, and for good reason. It's a great movie. And also, let me know what other movies everybody would like me to review in the future. Whether it's an older movie, you know, from the 70s or before, we can do some more retro reviews, or just any movies in general. If there's anything you want me to review on the channel, let me know in the comments, or hit me up on social media or Twitter and Instagram or whatever. Let me know what you want to see me review on the show, and I would happily oblige with that. I'm hoping to get the Patreon set up here going into the new year. So I'm going to be reviewing a lot of stuff on there. Haven't really have everything pushed aside for that as of yet. I'm still planning, but you know, be on the lookout for Patreon next year. But that is a review for this week, of course. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Cinema Trip Reviews. Also, make sure to drop in, leave us a good review wherever you get your podcast. Really helps us get the show out there to a lot of people, and I really appreciate it. And I'll see everybody next week.